consciousness, in all the thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious and instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being, that's our mental consciousness, or our mind, you know, but apart from the senses. And as Lama Yeshe says, we get hugely misled by the senses. We make the body the boss, you know. And this is something really important to comprehend, which we'll go into. So before I start going into the mental consciousness and its contents, anybody got any questions? Any thoughts, any clarity about terms or whatever you like? We're going to start to unpack it all, so, but in case you're not clear about something. Okay. Yes, darling?
If I'm going, let's say I'm feeling okay, and I'm going into a room, and in that room everybody is accepted. Automatically I will feel that.
I understand you. I understand. I understand.
In the same thing, I'm going to a different room, everybody's smiling, happy. I'll start laughing automatically.
Exactly.
I have no control over it.
Well, we can have control, but that's the right now we don't agree. So we're going to go into all that. That's once I start to explain how the mind works. Hopefully we'll get answers to that. Okay. Okay, let's look then at the contents of our mental consciousness, according to Buddhist psychology, coming from these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago. I mean, the Buddhist views, there are many variations of it that have developed over the centuries. Okay, so a simple way of dividing the contents, and this is coming, what's your name?
Neil.
Neil?
Yeah.
This is going to come slowly to your answer. So, as far as the Buddha is concerned, all these thousands of thoughts in our mental consciousness, in this workshop, we can divide them literally into three categories. This is sort of interesting. Initially it seems a bit simplistic, but it's really quite profound actually. And this is the basis of understanding Buddhist practice. And the basis, therefore, of the Buddha's conclusion that we can rid the mind of the rubbish and grow all the goodness. So in other words, the first two categories, he makes this distinction between the rubbish and the goodness. Speaking simply, okay. So really simply then you could say all these thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious and all of this whole spectrum of our inner being, they all come down to being either so-called negative states of mind. These are the ones we can get rid of. So there's many synonyms here: negative, non-virtuous, disturbing emotions. You know, if you read Buddhist literature, afflictions, these, this sort of medieval phrase. Delusions is a really crucial term to understand. I like to call them all the voices of ego. This is the first category. And these, for the Buddha, as far as he's concerned, are distorted, not valid, neurotic, disturbing, misconceptions, liars, delusional. These are all synonyms for this stuff. So already it sounds kind of brutal. Oh, you mean I'm a bad person? Because that's how we think about it. Don't hear that way. It should, we're trying to work out what it is that's the source of our suffering. We're trying to work it out what it is in our mind that is the source of our pain. What it is, okay? So already Neil's point is indicating that all the unhappy people is the source, isn't it? As you just said, no control. And what you just said is so perfect, because that's how we are at the moment. Exactly right. So therefore we assume if you're among happy people, you'll be happy, and we assume you're around unhappy people, we'll be unhappy, isn't it? And as you said, I have no control. You're exactly right, Neil, at the moment. But the Buddha's saying we can be. That's all. And to do that job, we have to understand this one. So, okay, there are this set of states of mind that I like to call them the voices of ego. There's like a hierarchy of them. And we're going to only discuss one or two of them, and that's already profound, I tell you. But the root one, Buddha says the deepest misconception, the deepest negative state of mind, the deepest neurosis in us is so primordial that we don't even have a term for it in our culture. We don't really have a term. In fact, and this is known colloquially as ego grasping. It's a really subtle, deeply, instinctively ingrained misconception about our very sense of I. And this is why these Indians and then the Buddha use these techniques to go to the depths of their being, to unpack and unravel this one. It's so subtle. It's extraordinary. So there's this Buddha saying there's this deep, instinctive, unhappy, separate, lonely, bereft, fear-based sense of I that underpins everything else. Then in this little hierarchy, if you like, the main voice of this unhappy I is not the word known as attachment. And this again, we could spend the rest of the 3 days not going past this word, just unpacking and unraveling this. And to really understand Buddhism and why we suffer, you've got to understand this. And again, this comes down to terminology. Because the way we use that word is virtually synonymous with goodness and close to people, and it's a good quality. So you can't, if you hear that when you hear the Buddha's use of it, you'll be very depressed. If we hear that attachment is a good thing, and we hear the Buddha says you've got to get rid of it, we go, oh, as Lama Zopa says, oh, you mean I've got to get rid of my happiness? I've got to get rid of my heart? We've got to use Buddha's definition. This is really important. It's not what we're thinking. He has a different definition of this word. Attachment is this, effectively, according to this packaging of Buddha's teachings known as the Four Noble Truths, this is the main source of our day-to-day suffering. These words are not how we talk, so they're going to sound puzzling, So if this is true, we better know what he means by attachment. Oh my goodness. So it's the main voice, I like to call it that, of this deepest one, the neurotic sense of I. And then what it is on the basis of this is that there's this frantic, we're born with this, the most fundamental energetic level of this attachment is a sense of dissatisfaction, a sense of never having enough, not being enough, always wanting more, no matter what I get, never enough, no matter what I achieve, never enough, no matter how thin I get, never enough, no matter how beautiful I get, never enough, no matter how I change my hair and my colour of my hair, never enough, no matter anything, never enough. It's this deep primordial sense of dissatisfaction. So then that next level of attachment that gives rise to, naturally, is this craving and hankering after something to fill up the gaping hole. And the first obvious gross level of this attachment is the objects of the senses. Then, let's just say I'm looking for a boy, So this little girl, you're wanting a boy. Boy seems to be the one, as well as the handbags, the dolls, of this and that, and people, blah, blah, blah. It's all there. The objects that we see out there through our senses. So naturally, we're walking around life, aren't we, determining if those particular objects will be the ones that my attachment wants. So then attachment is this dissatisfaction, neediness, craving. The next level of it is it gets the object, gets the panos, and suddenly, because you've been thinking about it and wanting this object, suddenly it lands on him. The I consciousness lands on that shape and colour, and then mad mental consciousness takes over, and attachment is so hungry and needy, it makes up this huge, fantastic story about how divine he is, and in a day you've got your whole life mapped out. Are we communicating? Yes. Okay. And just as one example, boy, it could be, some people it could be handbags, it could be money, it could be anything. And don't hear this as punitive. Don't hear it as, oh, you're naughty. Don't hear it like that. We're trying to recognise what it is that causes pain. And this is working non-stop, this attachment. So the next level of attachment, what it's just done, this is the key thing that's done, on the basis of that dissatisfaction, the neediness, the looking, the manipulating, the finding, the expecting, and then the exaggerating takes over. That's its key job. It exaggerates his deliciousness, and then exaggerates his role in my happiness. And then the whole, and then we make it permanent. Like, always quote Nicole Kidman when she was with Tom Cruise. She said, "We will be together until we're 80. So much, we'll go into all this. It's okay. So there's attachment, dissatisfaction, hunger, neediness, looking, manipulating, finding, exaggerating, then possessing. All of that is, all these words we've known, possessive, expectations, control freak, they're all just variations of how attachment works.